Turning now to some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have Salt Lake County Councilwoman Amy Winder-Newton and House Minority Leader Brian Keene. Great to have both of you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Evan McMullin was a guest at the top of the show. I want to start off with the U.S. Senate race. Councilwoman, let's start with you. Can this be competitive? And if so, what are the keys for McMullin in making it that way?
Well, I think it will be interesting, and one of the more interesting races that we've had in Utah for the U.S. Senate. I don't think McMullin's going to be able to pull it off, and I've got 4 reasons why. The first one is he said he will not caucus with anyone. I think Republicans especially are going to see that as a disadvantage. Right now, they're seeing somebody who has endorsed Joe Biden's America, and they're going to want somebody who can give every vote to lower taxes, less regulation, energy independence, and so I just don't see that happening. The second reason, I think we take for granted that we think Becky Edwards and Allie Isom voters are going to cross over and vote for McMullin. I just don't see that happening. I see the majority of their supporters voting for the party nominee. The third thing, I think that McMullin's going to have a hard time with the trust factor. People saw him in the 2016 presidential election. He talked about issues that were important to him there, and we're not seeing the same Evan McMullin in this necessarily, and so he's kind of a policy chameleon in a way, and I think that's going to make people really nervous. And then the last thing that I don't think we're hearing a lot about, but as the race continues, I think we'll hear more on, it's the committee assignments. The majority of the Senate work is done in committees, and those committees are determined in caucuses. And what worries me is if you have somebody who is an independent who's not caucusing, are they going to get a committee assignment? Because that's a big deal for Utah. We do not want our voice diminished. So for those 4 reasons, I just think he's going to struggle to get the majority of Utahns to support him.
What are the keys here if Evan McMullin is going to be successful and potentially win this race?
Well, you had close to 40% of Republicans saying they didn't want to vote for Mike Lee. And I don't know of any reason why those 38% that voted for Becky Edwards or Allie Isom wouldn't feel comfortable switching over and voting for Evan McMullin. McMullin got a significant percentage of votes when he ran for president in 2016 out of Utah. He was on the ballot here. He is known in that sense, and I think a lot of conservatives and Republicans are very comfortable voting for him. And of course, you're going to have a lot of unaffiliated voters. You're going to have a lot of Democrats who want to see anybody but Mike Lee in office. I think that some of the details that Amy has talked about are important once you're an insider, but for Utahns, I think most of them are going to be noticing and focusing on other things that Mike Lee has in a more high-profile way got some problems with. He's so closely affiliated with the former president. I don't think that Donald Trump is going to be wearing well as time goes on, and of course he hasn't worn particularly well across the country and in Utah since he left office. My expectation is that as more information comes out from the January 6th committee, that we're going to see more problematic behavior and concerns exist about just how close Mike Lee's affiliation with the Trump administration was and how undermining of basic constitutional principles he was. And I just think Utahns are going to be looking for another face. Now, one of the reasons that we have Evan McMullin versus Mike Lee, of course, is because Democrats made a tactical choice to not put anyone on the ballot. I think that was just pragmatism in action, and I think what you're going to see is the great majority of Democrats coming out to vote for Evan McMullin.
Amy, a clear strategy from the McMullin campaign has been, and I suspect will continue to be, to tie the senator with the former president, noting that in 2020 the former president did still win 58% of the vote here in the state of Utah. Is that a smart strategy?
I think the more time goes on, the more irrelevant our former president becomes, and I think Utahns aren't going to necessarily see that. I mean, those who are watching the January 6th Commission maybe, but I think the majority of Utahns aren't going to necessarily think about that as they're making their decision. I will say this, I would like to thank McMullin for running and for getting the Democrat nomination, if you will, because not having a Democrat at the top of that ticket I think hurts down ballot Democrats. I think it helps those of us Republicans running this year who know that progressive Democrats are frustrated that their party didn't nominate somebody. And so in some ways I think it will affect even other races in Utah to that extent.
That was a key point in that discussion at your convention, Representative. Talk about that. Will those, because this was a 43% of Democratic delegates voted not to go that route. Will they be energized in November to come out and vote?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I've been most impressed with is Cale Weston, who was running for the Democratic nomination, accepted the vote of the committee of the convention and said, if that's what the Democrats want to do, I'm going to support that move. He's continued to be very active in Democratic Party politics. He's continued to encourage Democrats to turn out and vote and to support Evan McMullin and to vote for down ballot Democrats. So I think Democrats are going to need to be unified on this issue for purposes of this particular election. My hope is that they come out. There may be some things about Evan McMullin, who is a former Republican, that a lot of Democrats aren't really going to like, but the reality is he's not seeking to undermine actively the Constitution of the United States of America in the way that we saw Senator Lee doing for weeks on end, as he, by his own admission, was saying 12, 14 hours a day. And so I think that Utahns are going to say, we don't want someone as our senator to continue in office who compares Donald Trump to Captain Moroni. I've had a number of members of the LDS Church say that they were greatly put off by that and offended by it. And I think that's going to be something that Evan McMullin reminds Utahns of.
All right. I did ask the senator that very question last week, and I just want to throw it out there. He did say that doing that was a mistake and something he wishes he wouldn't have done at the time. I want to get to one other quick thing real fast, because this is really playing out to be a fascinating dynamic to me. So we have this election year where one party is in control of the White House and both chambers of Congress. Typically, you'll see the chambers of Congress switch in that kind of year. We also have an economy where, you know, we can argue whose fault it is, but clearly polls show that most Americans hold the president responsible. But then we have all these rulings coming down from the Supreme Court, and that really seems to be firing up the Democratic base. Amy, let's start with you. How do you see this all balancing out in November?
Well, I know we have passionate people about the abortion issue and people that are mad. Whether or not that switches who they would have voted for, I think, is the question. I don't know that that's as top of mind as the economy is. Just because if you look at everything that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, the economy is in your face all the time. When you go to the gas pump and you're seeing these higher gas prices, when you're going to the grocery store and you're trying to feed your family, I think Americans are going to remember that. That's the stuff that's more emotional to them because it hits them every day. It's something that they're dealing with day in and day out. And when they look at the economy and the struggles there, I think that's going to be a stronger case for those persuadables that were in the middle to vote Republican this year instead of vote Democrat. And I think it still is going to be a stronger, more compelling issue for the midterm elections.
All right, Brian, your thoughts on that?
Well, Republicans have spent 4 decades working as hard as they could to encourage people to get out and vote for Republicans so that they could get the courts and the makeup of our federal judiciary changed in a way that would get Roe v. Wade overturned. Now the dog has got the bus. The dog caught the bus, and what we're going to see is Republicans regretting the fact that they've been so aggressive in putting in place an ultra-conservative Supreme Court majority, supermajority, that will basically intrude on the most personal private rights we have as Utahns and as United States citizens. I honestly think this is going to be something that Republicans and this Supreme Court will regret, because this relates to the most personal private behavior that we have as individuals. In Utahns, we've always prided our libertarian instincts, our commitment to autonomy, our commitment to our own agency, freedom, and liberty, and this strikes at the core of those very fundamental things. So I really do think that you're going to have people coming out in the way that they behave in their voting patterns come November in a way that is different than they have voted in the past, because they recognize we've got to get away from this intrusive kind of approach that Republicans across this country have led us into.
It will be interesting to watch. Really appreciate both of you being here, and thanks so much for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.